Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at Armoured Clash, the rulebook, version 1.0 for the Dystopian Age. Now today you're also going to get to watch a Let's Play from the new two-player starter set for the Armoured Clash Dystopian Age game called The Battle for Singapore, and check out a review of that box set as well, which is a very comprehensive two-player starter set. Now, this little A5 scale rulebook is available for sale right now off the Warcradle website and local stockists. I was able to find it here in Canada for not too many bucks, and is a classic A5 scale, which means I believe it's 8 by 5 or 8 by 5.5 inch. Like just full complete rulebook for this game. Now the rulebooks that come inside the box set, the two-player box, are quick start rulebooks. They focus on the core mechanics of the game. Everything that's true in that game is true in this game, with the slight exception of morale, which uses a deck of cards, also available for purchase separately. And yeah, and this is a, I guess, 10mm mass combat diesel punk, end of the 19th century. We discover alien technology, which drastically increases our tech level, but the rest of history kind of remains the same. The two-player box set focuses on the forces of the Empire and the Crown. I painted up the Crown faction that's in there, while Bob painted up the Empire, and it also uses the same universal token set as the sister games Dystopian Wars, which is their naval combat game, and Wild West Exodus. Now, this rulebook and the box set were sent along as complimentary review copies by the folks at Warcradle, which was super kind of them, and James Hewitt, who wrote this, as well as several of your other favorite games, probably, including things like Adeptus Titanicus, is the author of this game. Creative direction is Stuart McCannis, and Chris Pond is the studio manager here. The writer, of course, is James Hewitt. And the other developers are Parker Edward Spence and Matthew Carter. Do love that Warcradle is crediting all of their designers and artists. Art direction is by Roberto Guerrilla. Book design and layout is by Gianni Venturini. Illustrations are by Neil Googe and James Ginn. Or Ginn. You know what? I'm just not even going to try anymore. If I get it wrong, I'm Canadian, folks. We say everything funny up here. And painting is by Darren McIninch and Lee Phillips. I'm going to do my best, but that's what we get when we have me pronouncing these names. So Armoured Clash, like I said, is kind of the answer to the classic question. If you want to play giant, like sort of battalion scale war games, you have two options. One, make a bigger table. Two, make the miniature smaller. I prefer the latter over the former. I'm not a big fan of apocalypse style all day games. I like fit for purpose games, which means the rules abstract as the models get smaller, and that's what we have here. It is a proprietary dice game. And I know that's a bit of a bugbear for some people. However, you could, because it's six-sided dice, not weird shaped dice, you could easily just use D6s and remember that, you know, a 1 is a complete miss, a 2 is a miss, a 1's a dud, a 2's a miss, a 3's a glance, 4 5s are hits, and 6s are critical strikes, and you don't really need to buy the proprietary dice. They're very handy, but as long as you know what your results are equal to, you could just use D6s. This is one of those times where it's not very hard. It's just a scaling dice set. In fact, they're very similar to the Warhammer Underworld's dice result tables, and you get 24 of them in the two-player starter set, which is more than enough for 2 players to each have their own 12 dice set, and we never needed more than like 7 or 8 dice, probably, even with exploding dice in the game. It does use a scaling mechanic where it's called a heroic strike is worth 2 successes. It also explodes and allows you to roll an additional dice in most situations, which can then, after you resolve that, lead to further rerolls. Like all of your glancing hits automatically get rerolled, which is a single chevron. The X's are misses if you're in close range typically of something, or you have support. Like for instance, if you're in melee and you're supported by another unit, you reroll those. And then the blanks are duds, don't get rerolled and just stay out of the dice pool. You're just counting successes, and your success pool is then compared to usually something's armor, and every time you hit that armor threshold, it takes a point of damage. That's used to resolve almost everything in the game. Everything else is basically pairing up, can my dice pool affect your model, and that's done through a trait system. The game runs off 3 stats. Those stats are movement, armor, and defense, and then It's a defense or armor. It's say defense. It's the same thing basically. And then your damage limit, and then you have your discipline, which is your ability to sort of like stay cool. Now, there is in the quick start rules a dice-based system for doing discipline to see if you get pinned or not when you take a casualty. The full game system uses the deck of cards, and you just cut cards basically, and there's a number on the entire deck. The number will then, if it's equal to under your discipline, you succeed. Otherwise, you fail. And then your break limit, which means which model counts, you just count as broken and then get a bunch of penalties. Now, the sort of like the core mechanic of this game being a dice pool system, and then that defense and damage like limit of how many times you can take damage before you remove a model from a unit. Army construction is very simple. Typically, you'll have a number of models in a unit. So, for instance, this rifle platoon here, it starts with 6 models in it. As it loses models, its effectiveness goes up and down. So if you reinforce it twice, all the way up to 18, because for every time you're reinforcing, it's a lot like Warhammer Age of Sigmar. You just add the base amount of models to the unit again. So it starts at 6 for Rifle Company, goes to 12, and then goes to 18. Your attacks scale. Right, and then as you take damage, your attacks scale down back to your basic amount. So if you have a basic size unit, you never roll less attack dice than you start off with. The other things that will then classify your unit is your trait system, and traits are everything from your like kind of unit that you are. So for instance, infantry, armored, cavalry, and I'm forgetting one, which is artillery, would be the 3 or the 4 sort of like unit types that you can be. This can trigger additional special rules later on. And then are you light or heavy? And light or heavy just means what kind of weapons like will affect you. So is it anti-tank style weapons that'll affect you if you're heavy, or is it mass spring bullet flechette type weapons if you're light? And that's it. And most units will have one of those attacks. There's also 2 types of close combat attacks when you're in contact. There's melee, and melee attacks can also be used to counterattack when someone attacks you. And impact only gets used when you're charging because it's the effect of driving over you. So for instance, if you charge a tank won't fight back against you if you charge it because it's not expecting the attack. Whereas if a tank attacks you, it does its impact hits, and if you have melee weapons, you can attack back against it. There's just certain situations where impact is like an active ability, and then melee can strike both ways. And then you get your special rules, and special rules can be the thing that makes a unit unique. So for instance, in my Crown Army, my Sharps rifles, if they stand still, they always count as being at short range, even if they're maximum range for their rifles, because they got little scopes and their weapons are actually rifled. Other units, such as my artillery, they're hard to move around, so if they move, they half their attack value in dice. And these traits are the things that make units different, basically, between armies. Otherwise, it's pretty much a stand of infantry is a stand of infantry is a stand of infantry, and most things have common profiles across the entire game, because, you know, a bunch of guys with a rifle or a bunch of guys with a rifle in this sort of like late 19th century era. Now, there are other types of units in the game, things like, you know, we got robots, we got sort of automata, we got tanks, and we even have land battleships like this giant one right here that has to use a turning template. You got all your different unit statuses for activated and unactivated, and it does use a alternating activation system across the game turn. So typically, start the turn, you're going to roll priority. That priority is going to be 6 dice. Person that gets the most successes totaled after the rerolls is the person that takes the initiative dial and gets to go first. And then you go back and forth activating a unit. When you activate a unit, there's 2 parts to an order. It's maneuver. There's different maneuvers you can do, such as advance, which is walk your movement, at the double, which is go twice your movement, but you give up your shooting action or your melee action, and charge, which is you move twice and you can engage in combat. Otherwise, you can't come into contact with another model. And then you've got your following actions, which is shoot and melee. Melee is exactly the same as shoot, except for there's some basic like things like you don't need to have a trait, so melee works against everything. So melee will work against light or heavy, regardless of who it is, because you find a way to damage the thing you're attacking. And then, of course, there's the retaliation and counterattack afterwards, too, and things like supporting. So you would get your short range, you're getting to reroll misses bonus. That happens when you're supported instead. So in shooting, if you've got your unit inside the short range of whatever your weapon is from your weapon profile, all of those X's get rerolled on the dice. If you are in melee, the same thing's true if you have another unit within 2 inches of you while you're charging, because they're supporting with like lending fire and stuff like that. Again, a really simple core mechanic system of just moving around and doing stuff with alternating activations. And then you've got this deck of cards, which is the advanced rules that aren't in the two-player starter set, but you can buy and are laid out in here, which is you got your Command and Conquest cards. They're basically a little bit like the cards in Spearhead, actually, if you played the Warhammer Age of Sigmar game. They can be used either as boosts or as ways of scoring additional points over the course of the turn. Your units also have a thing called a victory point rating, and the victory point rating is how many points they're worth when they die. And surprisingly, it's not necessarily equal to your point value. You can have expensive units that don't actually give you a lot of points at the end of it all. Now, your cards, when you draw your cards, will be based upon your game size. Skirmish is 4, Battle is 5, and Cataclysm is 6. When you actually like build your forces and stuff like that, you would pick one of these 3 game sides to play from. And like I said, you go back to the activation phase and then the end phase. So right now we're at 22 pages, including the beginning background. So for what you need to play from the beginning, 6 to 22. So we're looking at 16 pages of rules. For the core rules of the game, and that's it. That's the whole core rules of the game. It is a rank and flank game, interestingly enough. The infantry actually rank up when they move around, but movement's pretty free. You basically just measure from the furthest model and then rank them around it. Was the easiest way we found to do it. You don't need movement trays or anything like that. When you have a open formation, which is not like an infantry unit typically, they just have to be within 3 inches of the leader model, and every unit in the game has to have a leader model. And then, yeah, end phase, you determine your victory points for the round, and you may have won or lost based on the actual, the actual, scenario that you're playing. So activating unit, reaction step, the opposing general has a chance to declare opportunity fire against the active unit. That's the movement step, they move. Reaction step, you can do the opportunity fire again. And then the attack step, they make an attack action. So in the core rules, the movement step and attack step are the basic core mechanics. The reaction steps are for when units are on the lookout, which is an order you can give them when they're doing their attack step instead of moving or fighting. It's kind of like an Overwatch, and they spend their on the lookouts to try and shoot something as it scoots by. It basically allows you to have units wait without line of fire and then take shots later on. The attack step, you can also not move to aim. So choose a target, the target acquisition, you get a bonus. The attacking unit makes an aim movement. The attacking is in short range. These all give you your ability to reroll. Concealed, the attacking unit's officer cannot draw line of sight to at least half the units. Suppressed, they're suppressed, they get a penalty to their firing. Opportunity fire, if you're using opportunity fire, you're automatically penalized. And then reforming is when you're going to have to get out of a vehicle or exit like a building or something like that during the turn. And that's it. So you roll your attack dice pool, remove casualties, and if any units die in the target unit, like any actual models are removed, then you have to make a suppression test, which is usually cutting cards to see if you can get a number that's under your discipline. Otherwise, in the core 2-player starter set, it's just roll your discipline in dice, and as long as you get 4 successes with no bonuses, then you will pass your test. Some other bonuses for melee, things like outflanking. So if you've hit somebody in the side or rear, overwhelming, the attacker is in infantry and the target is armor or fortification. So if you're attacking something that's like doesn't have infantry to fight back with, you get a bonus automatically. And then supported if there's somebody within 2 of you. And then penalized if you're suppressed, like always, and then threatened, there's at least 1 enemy on it within 2 of the attacking units. So if the opponent is supported. And bonuses and penalties can cancel each other out. So you might have a bonus, but your opponent has a penalty, and then it would go to neutral. And that's going to mean which things do you re-roll. So you might not even re-roll your glancing hits if you're double penalized, or if you're single penalized, and you're just going off your basic successes. Whereas if you're all the way supported, you might get down to re-rolling all your misses as well. If a side loses more units, then they have to withdraw 3 inches immediately and make a suppression test. And if they stalemate, if neither side loses it, the attacking unit withdraws and neither side makes a suppression test. You just back off. There's your other statuses, so reloading, on the lookout, and taking cover, which are all your additional special actions. So gain a lookout token, gain a taking cover token, rearm, so if you have a reloading token, then you can reload your guns. Embark, get into a vehicle, or garrison, which is going to a building. Basically, they take away your shooting action. And all this stuff would be simplified in the core mechanics in the quick start rules, but it gets sort of like further explained here. And then we got our expression of the attack rolls. I've basically gone through all this now, so I'm not going to go too far into it. The buildings that come in the 2-player starter set especially do have a big purpose in that occupying them give you a whole bunch of advantages, and very often they're going to be the objectives on the table too, which is kind of nice. When you enter a building, you just take the command model and put it on top, and then put the rest of the models to one side so you can show that you're occupying it. And your unit, for all intents and purposes, gains +1 defense and counts as being that piece of terrain when you're inside of it. So you're occupied or unoccupied. Now, it can be charged, of course, and stormed just like it is the unit itself. And then transports work a lot like buildings. You can get in and get out to embark and disembark, but you are sort of like confused, as I said earlier, when you're doing so, because it takes some time to get out. And then all your traits. Commanders that add to your discipline and remove disorientation from people. Units within 10 cannot become disordered. If a disordered unit's within 10, they immediately lose disordered status. Transports behemoths, which is the giant land fortresses. And there's rules for aircraft coming in later on too, which is cool. And aircraft basically stay off the table. So a skirmish is 1,000 points, 500 to 1,500. A battle's 2,000 points, which is, I guess, going to be the standard game size. And then a cataclysm is 3,000 points. We're probably going to play skirmishes. Honestly, they're a good sized game. 1,000 points is plenty of units, and you get about 800 points in the 2-player starter set, which you could easily bolster to 1,000 points with some like unit upgrades or building the models differently and stuff like that. I get 4 cards, and it's played on a 36 by 48 table. A battle at 2,000 points is going to be at the standard game size. If we jump to 1,500, 2 copies of the starter set or the single faction starters that are available right now, they would get you about 1,500 points, especially if you have the land fortress, it's 500 points by itself. So the behemoths in both armies are about 500 points. They make the starter set 1,500 points easily, almost 2,000 points. But with 800 point in just the Battle for Singapore box on each side, you're not, if you double that, you're at 1,600, and then 500, you're at about 2,100 with the basic like faction starter boxes. So plenty. You play on a 4x4 with five cards in your hand. The Orbats are all free. You can go download them right now from armouredclash.com. You can get the basically little codexes for each of the armies, which is really nice. It has all the miniatures currently available. Some rules for terrain, and then we got our basic scenarios, which we'll be playing. We have the map. The map is also available as a giant printout, which I'm gonna get framed in the 2-player starter set, which I thought was really cool. And then the rest is all the background for the forces in the game, which is really nice. So the following, I do like that they put the rules up front. So the first 64 pages, minus about 6 at the start, it's looking like 50, 58, roughly 60 pages is gonna be rules for the game. And the rest is background out of the 154 page count in here. And we got and there's a reference section as well. Other factions that are coming out, the Union. So it's what's going on in America right now. The Sultanate. These are the other core factions that are going to be getting boxes. The Enlightened, who all live in, I think they're the ones that found the aliens in Antarctica. We get the Empire, which is in the 2-player starter set, the Crown, which I was playing with, and also the Commonwealth and the Alliance. And these are basically the European states and stuff like that. So we got 8 factions in the game. I think they're planning in the next 2 years to release them all. And there's already one up for pre-order with 2 already out in the starter set. So there it is, the rulebook for Armored Clash. There's also I think a downloadable version of this for free on the website too, if you want to look at it for yourself. And you can check out our gameplay for the quick start rules. Remember, we're showing what's in the box. So all the rules that are in this, like the card deck, the advanced rules for things like like the advantage disadvantage stuff where you bump them up and bump them down, they're not in the quick start rules. We try and stick to what's in the box when we do those things, so people don't get confused if they're playing what's in the box too and they're trying to look at it as a guide. But our 3rd game, we're gonna be playing with the full rules, and we go through the 4th and 5th mission from the Battle for Singapore box set. One will be today, and the other will be next week. So there it is, Armored Clash. What do I think? Well, rules are great. Rules are great for any game when they get out of the way of the gameplay experience. And this is a nice 16-page core rule set. It's real simple. It's a real simple opposed dice system. It doesn't even include like special effects on dice, like wilds or triggers or anything like that. It's just a critical strike, 2 basic strikes, and then 2 scalable reroll things, which allow you to push the advantage disadvantage sort of like mechanic. You can just use D6s at home if you need to. They're not like a weird polyhedral dice that's going to require you to do a bunch of like mental memory. It just, are you rerolling 2s or rerolling 3s in certain scenarios? And the offer from the box and production of the game itself is at like industry standard. And you can see that in the review today of the 2-player starter set. I will say for Warcradle to make something like this is actually pretty compelling, because this is probably the box that's come out this year that if you're a Games Workshop hobbyist and you were looking for the exact same experience you felt you were having at Games Workshop, if you opened that box, you wouldn't be confused. I have a few minor nitpicks. It didn't come with instructions. They're all QR codes. This is just a thing that's bothering me in the industry right now, where you can hyperlink to everything. It's fine that that's the way it is, but if your website's down for whatever reason, you can, having a couple pages of extra paper in there to make sure that at least the miniatures can be built, step one of the product offer can be done, I think is pretty important. But like, for the core rules themselves, one, to be free, two, to be in this nice cheap like A5 scale, like pocket quality, and three, to be combined with, I think, probably one of the nicest curated boxes for two people to start playing a game that's come out this year. Yeah, give this one a go. If you like this scale, or if you don't want to play a Games Workshop game, like, you can play effectively the same amount of miniatures as for Legions Imperialis, 2-player starter set, for about a third the price. You're gonna have as many miniatures as came in that last box set, about a third the price, same component quality. The whole game is available already for download. Like, it's just free downloads for all the factions, so you can see what faction you might want to play in the future and just check it out and download it. Yeah, they've done a really good job right before Christmas of coming out with a compelling box. And it's cool because it's our world, and it's like a weird diesel punk version of our world. So I'm here for it. I'm excited to play more of this. But I had a great time playing it last week with just the quick start rules. And I'm looking forward to him coming back and me playing like a full 1,000-point game on a, I think we're going to play on a 3x4 because that's the skirmish level, with the cards and everything to give it a go. And yeah, see how the whatchamacallit, see how the gameplay experience goes, like, out of this rulebook in like a full format. So I hope we get that done in December, get that up for you guys soon. And big thanks to Warcradle sending this along, and good job. Honestly, James is one of my favorite sort of like working designers right now, because I think he understands the balance between playability and experience. It needs to feel a way. So rules can support that, or rules can get in the way of that. And I think he's treading the needle pretty well. Yeah, so thanks for them sending this along. You guys for watching. Text out MASH. Happy gaming.